Hello, everyone. This is David, and tonight's movie that we watched is the 1990 movie Tremors. Now, this movie is really a good movie, and I recommend definitely seeing it before you listen to this if you haven't seen it before, because we're going to give away things that aren't terribly important, but if it's your first time seeing it, some of the mystique of the movie will be lost if you've heard about this sort of stuff at all. That being said, this is a fairly popular movie, at very least has a very serious cult following. So you've probably seen or heard of some of the tangential things if you haven't seen the movie itself. I mean, there was a television series on Sci-Fi for a little bit, and there's several movies that have been made in the series, and the monsters themselves are fairly iconic at this point. That being said, with that out of the way, this is a great movie. Definitely check it out. Okay, now let's move on to talking about the movie and the monsters themselves. Now, the monsters in this movie don't actually have a name yet. They get a name officially in the second movie, but they become named what are called graboids. And that is the name I'm going to use to address them because, well, that is their official name as of the second movie. The creatures in here are basically large subterranean sandworm type things that have a series of tongues that can come out of their mouths and grab whatever it is that is interesting to them and kind of manipulate it. So they're kind of like manipulator hands / tongues that also drag things down into the dirt. Some of the other abilities they have is they're incredibly sensitive to sound, and specifically tremors in the ground. They're tremor sensitive, and that's how they hunt. Kind of like the way a snake can see heat. Well, not all snakes, but some snakes can see heat or whatnot. These things feel vibrations, which makes them very effective for the most part, but you can fool them. And their intellect varies kind of wildly. You kind of get the idea that they are intelligent, if an alien sort of intelligence. But at the same time, they're also very instinctual, so it's kind of hard to gauge how smart or dumb they actually are as an animal. They're an invertebrate, so one would assume they don't have like a higher processing like that of a mammal, but they also don't really line up with other invertebrates because of a lot of weird things about them. So graboids are a fairly mysterious creature, and their entire life cycle doesn't make a lick of sense. But they are a movie monster, so I mean, what do you really expect at the end of the day? This isn't nature. This is just whatever it is. So graboids tend to be a problem, especially if you live anywhere where they can dig through the dirt. Now, I remember as a kid being quite scared of this concept of this underground creature lurking, coming to get you, this horrible thing. And as funny as it sounds, this concept has been done a couple times. Now, when I remember first hearing about this, my father told me that, that's just they're just taking inspiration from the movie Dune, or the book Dune, depending on your perspective, which had giant sandworms that would eat and would be attracted to any sort of vibrations, and they would eat it. The difference being that the worms in Dune were hundreds and hundreds of feet long, if not longer, and the ones in this are about 30 feet long, and eat people as opposed to like buildings. So that's interesting, but there's actually another movie that this movie draws some interesting, if almost borderline, like stealing parallels, and that movie is Blood Beach. And I'm pretty sure it came out before this one. I don't know the exact date, but this one came out in 90, and I think Blood Beach was sometime in the 80s. And the culprit there is basically a giant worm that lives in the sand and eats beachgoers, and no one knows what's going on. There's just a bunch of disappearances and mutilations at the beach. This one takes place in the desert, not the beach, but a desert for the most part is like a beach without water in a lot of ways. I mean, not exactly, obviously, but you got a lot of sand, a lot of scrubby kind of plants. But anyway, so that's about the monsters. So let's get into this movie. So this movie revolves around two main characters, um, Val and Earl, and they're handymen working in this tiny little town in Nevada called Perfection. And we're not really explained their backstory too much, only that they have some sort of, for some reason, these two guys work together. They're like a dynamic duo. Although there's no Batman and Robin here, it's kind of more like they're both the other's sidekick. It's kind of weird. I don't know why they ended up living together or any of that sort of stuff. I mean, nowadays, if you had something like that, like two dudes that are like in the middle of nowhere that live together like that, it would be, they'd be a couple or something. But they're just a professional relationship because obviously Val likes the ladies in this, and later on in the second movie we find out that so does Earl. There is no like homosexual overtones or anything like that, like really as far as I've seen. It's just two friends apparently that live and work together, which is fine. There doesn't need to be any of that sort of stuff, and being that this came out in the 90s, like that really wasn't at the forefront of anyone's mind. But nowadays, with things like Brokeback Mountain and some of the other movies, I mean, you can go back and rewatch it and be like, well, I could kind of see that, I suppose. Um, but yeah, like there are these two guys that live and work together in the middle of nowhere. So that poses some interesting questions of how they got into this, how they got to where they are. I've always wondered that about the two of them because there's only like a handful of people that live out there. There's the storekeeper, Walter Chang. There's Mindy and Sandy, who's a mother and daughter. There's Bert and Heather, who are survivalists. There's Rhonda, who is the college graduate that's doing seismology tests. There's Fred, who we don't really get to know. Nestor, and I'm trying to think of who else. Trying to think of the other kid's name. It's escaping me at the moment. Anyway, maybe it'll come to me later. There's a couple other characters that are out there, but most of them don't get a lot of development. Honestly, it's like Bert gets a good amount of development. Walter gets an okay amount. I mean, obviously you've got Val and Earl, and they're the main characters, and then Rhonda's the love interest for Val, because again, this is a 90s movie. So there's got to be a love interest for the male character for some reason. I should also mention that this is an early Kevin Bacon movie. I mean, I don't remember what his first movie was, but it is a fairly early Kevin Bacon movie, really before he took off in popularity. This is, I think, the tip of just the start of the iceberg, so to speak. And after this, he sort of became super popular. I don't know exactly when that hit, but it was sometime a little after this movie, I think, that his popularity really shot up. And I remember he was like a big star all throughout the 90s. Hence, we have like 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon, but I'm beginning to digress. So anyway, Val and Earl, these two guys, and they're working around. They're doing all this work at Imperfection for all the various people that are there. They're basically hired hands that do whatever needs being done around the place. For surprisingly little money, but I can't imagine it costs much to live out there. Like, they're moving garbage for like $50, or they're pumping in oil to someone's oil tank, or doing deliveries, just whatever they can. And finally, they decide, after like going around for a day's work, they decide, screw it, we're done. They get into an argument, and they decide they're moving to Bixby, which is the next closest town. And they pack up, and they head out. They run into a couple snags along the way. Sandy is tries to get them to help her build her kiln and whatnot. But they're like, nope, we're going. So they go, and there's some construction going on. And these two construction guys are doing basically road work near the this pass that's like the only way in and out of the valley that they're in, apparently. And I don't really know what they're trying to do, but they're fixing up something. Who knows? exactly. There's only two of them though, which I think is kind of weird. You figure there'd be more guys, but apparently what they're doing is not too important. And they drive on out, and they see a man. They see a guy. Was it up on a tower? And it turns out it's this guy, Victor, or Edgar. Yeah, it's Edgar, and he's dead at the top of an electrical tower. And he has his like rifle with him. And they take him to the dock, and they find out he died of dehydration. And they don't know for the life of them why. So they decide they take him back, and they decide they're gonna go. Actually, wait, they haven't bumped into the the construction workers yet, because they hadn't gotten to Fred's place. Sorry about that, a little out of place. So they decide, screw it. This is a little freaky. Let's get out of here. So they bomb out, and they find that Fred's place and his flock sheep have all been devoured. And they find like Fred's hat sitting on the ground. They pull it up, and it's his head sticking out of the ground. And they're really freaking out because there's just a severed head. They drive back, and they warn the construction workers. Meanwhile, so shortly after they leave, the construction workers are digging. One's got a jackhammer, and he jackhammers into the ground, and you hear something scream, and then like this orange blood come up, and that is the sign that the graboid is here, and it takes it starts moving in a direction, like the jackhammer goes with it, because it's like in its body, up over a cliff, and one of the guy that was working on it, his foot was like wrapped around the cord, so he goes with it. It kills him, and then they knock rocks down because of that, and block the pass, so people can't get out. So they go back to Val and Earl get back to town. They warn everybody, and they decide, oh, well, you guys need to get to Bixby to warn the authorities. Someone needs to come out here because we got 2 dead bodies and whatnot. So they drive out to the pass. The pass has collapsed. They realize that the people there have been killed. They find like a bloody like construction helmet. So they're really freaking out. So they go to drive away. Their car gets caught on something. They argue over whether or not they're hung up. And then the car gets released, and they go back to town to tell them that the pass is basically collapsed and that they need to take like horses to get out. Well, it turns out they find something strange on the bottom of their car. There's this large thing. It looks like a big snake with no eyes. It's got like kind of like these little horns at the bottom of it. It's got like rudimentary teeth. It's this horrible looking snake-like creature. And they figure that that's what stalled out their truck, and that if that's what stalled out their truck, that must be pretty strong. And they theorize that, well, one of them couldn't eat all the sheep and Fred, so there must be more. So meanwhile, they decide someone's got to go out there and basically get to Bixby. So they take Walter's saddle horses. Val and Earl go. And there's another thing that happens during this I haven't elaborated on yet. They play rock, paper, scissors, Val and Earl, to see who's going to do what. And Earl always wins the rock, paper, scissors. When Earl doesn't win the rock, paper, scissors, something good will immediately happen to Earl. So, like, in this case, they Rochambeau to see who takes the rifle. Edgar's old rifle. And, what is it? Earl loses. But then, Heather's like, well, you can't just go out there with that like pistol you have. Here, take this assault rifle that I have, and and Earl's like, yeah, thanks. And meanwhile, Val's shooting him like this death stare, because he won the rifle, but he lost out because he only loses he only wins, or Val only wins when it doesn't matter, really. So it's just kind of funny that way. So they go riding, and they find they get attacked. Basically, they go out for a while, and they get attacked. The horse gets wrapped up in one of the tentacles, and the whole graboid comes out, and they find out that the thing is actually just one big monster as opposed to like a bunch of little ones, and they're running from it. It slams into the side of a aqueduct that was carved out in the desert and kills itself. They find out, they basically dig out the thing. Rhonda shows up and is like, hey, you guys see anything weird just now? And they look at the collapsed, basically, like aqueduct, and they open it up, and the whole worm kind of like, well, not the front end of it kind of spills out. Meanwhile, Val dug up the back of it, and just, it's this huge thing, like 30 feet long worm. And they look at it for a little while, and they're kind of like trying to figure out what it is. And Rhonda then theorizes that that must be pretty fast because the little spines that it has along its body push it. But then she figures it can't be as fast because she was getting multiple signatures at the same time. So there must be at least 3 others. So there's one dead, but there's 3 more left. And in fact, they are correct because one comes for them imminently. They manage to get up on a rock, though. They can't burrow through stone. And end up spending the night on a boulder. Rhonda figures that the boulder, while safe, resonates sound really well, so that the graboid can tell exactly where they are. And they find out that graboids are very patient. They're willing to just wait. If they feel there's prey nearby, they're willing to just wait. Which, on some level, kind of confuses me. Because, yeah, that's fine if you want to just wait. But, like, with Edgar, they never got anything out of that deal. So, they have to, like, there's plenty of stuff out there in nature. So, I'd imagine they'd move on eventually. But, apparently not. Rhonda comes up with the idea the next day of pole vaulting to basically get to a truck because her truck's parked next to a boulder. They do so. They pole vault across the rocks. They manage to get to her truck, and they manage to get back to town. They explain to the townsfolk basically what's going on. Townsfolk don't really understand it at first. They want to know what's going on or how it works and all that stuff. And Rhonda doesn't have answers because, I mean, she just found out about this stuff. The graboids attack. They kill Lester. Everyone ends up on the roofs. They kill Walter. What is it? The graboids go and attack Bert and Heather's house, which is a few miles away, and but visible from like the store because I mean it's all basically flat valley land. And Heather and Bert manage to kill one. They just gun it down because their basement is filled with weapons. And that's pretty good. And then Bert goes about making some homemade bombs. They figure out how to... They figure they're going to go up the old Jeep trail because it's in the mountains, and the mountains are made out of stone. And the worms can't go through stone, basically. And so they decide that they're going to take the cat, they're going to hook up the trailer to the cat, and the cat's going to drag it. The cat's basically a big bulldozer. So they do that, and they're driving, and the graboids attack basically every time they stop. They pick up Bert and Heather. They begin driving out. The graboids make a trap for them. The cat falls into the trap. They end up having to run back to... The trap's basically this ditch that they dig out. They end up having to run back to like this big rock formation. And they figure out a way to kill the graboids, and that being lighting a bomb and basically going fishing. Which kills one of them, but the second one doesn't, or the last one basically is smart enough to know that the previous one got killed by a bomb and throws the bomb back to them. Val Earl and Rhonda all get knocked far off into the desert, and Val figures out an idea that when a bomb goes off, they get scared and run away. Well, since that's true, he basically tricks one into jumping off of a cliff, because it runs in a direction away from the sound, because the sound causes it pain. And that is the end of the last graboid, and it falls to its death and dies. Val ends up with Rhonda, and the movie kind of closes on that. All in all, this is a really good movie, and I definitely suggest checking it out. If you like this one, you may or may not like the sequels. The only sequel that I really had a problem with was the fourth one, which was basically a prequel, which kind of just didn't work for me. I didn't get it. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. But anyway, so very watchable movie. I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5. Exceptionally good. Definitely check it out. All right, folks. Good night.